Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about our robot overlords and how they're going to make our lives maybe a little easier. My name's David Eaves. I'm kind of an open government activist. I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can reshape government to enable it to better serve citizens. One of the ways I like to think about it is I try to work on very simple problems that happen to exist in very complex organizations. Or as I sometimes like to frame it, I hack bureaucracies. And I do that because I actually care an enormous amount about the organizations that have these simple problems. And I think we all have to be working hard to think about how we can each hack the organization we're in to make it do the thing that it's supposed to be doing, but yet at the moment, it's kind of not programmed or the culture doesn't seem to be letting it do that. And so that's where I kind of spend my time and energy. And I want to share with you a couple of lessons that I've learned while hacking bureaucracy. So the things I want to talk about are how do we architect problems in a different way that allows them to be more solvable? How do we use data in kind of strategic and interesting ways? And then most importantly, how do we think about power? Because I kind of sometimes worry that the conversation about power disappears in a world where we start talking about open innovation and open data. So one of the things that happens when I'm hacking an organization, and sometimes I hack organizations that don't want me to hack them, I make them do things, I pressure them in ways, but sometimes they invite me in, they say, we actually want to change, we're interested. And sometimes those organizations are government, and very often they say to me something like, we want to be more like open source. We want to collaborate with more people. And the first thing, the most important thing I want to share with you, and the first thing I try to convey to them is actually the whole reason open source works is because on a very basic level, it's actually anti-collaborative. It actually works very hard to not have people working together. And so let me kind of convey that in a deeper sense. So I consider collaboration this complex thing where it's like, thesis, antithesis of a Hegelian process. We're opposite each other, we're talking, we're engaging, and something new and beautiful comes out of that neither one of us could have imagined before. And that's what collaboration is. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also very high touch. I want to compare that with what I think is actually going on in open source. The genius of open source is not that they get 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people in the room all working on something, collaborating together. The genius is they structure the problem in a way that anyone can come along and grab a piece of that problem, maybe call it a bug, grab it, walk away, and work on their own in isolation or with a team that they're comfortable with, and then bring that solution back, and that's the genius part. Slide that tiny part of the solution back into the overall problem, and it works. And what that allows is for tremendous amount of scaling. It allows a lot of people to be working on problems, and the secret is all on how you architect it. So I try to think about how we can use open to architect problems differently. To do that, I want to share with you one of my least favorite websites in the world. This is the Vancouver Coastal Health restaurant inspection website. So I want you to ignore the fact that it is maybe not the prettiest site that you've ever seen. It's not terrible, it's not the prettiest site. And then I want you to ignore the fact that they have this special language that basically says, although we're providing you with this information, we don't really actually want you to use this information to inform any decisions that you might actually make about the restaurants that are in this site. And then I want you to ignore the fact that the search is a little bit clunky and things like that. And this is how I arrived, because this is the moment where I kind of realized I really wanted to hack organizations, was when I got food poisoning. And I was all curled up in the fetal position feeling pain. And you know what I did? I went to the restaurant inspection site. And I realized in that moment that the only people who go to this site are people who have been food poisoned. Nobody's ending up at this site before they check a restaurant. I mean, maybe there's like 3 people in the audience, like the OCD people in the audience who are like there, making sure the restaurant is okay before they go. But you are in the minority, let me tell you. And here's the really crazy part, which is there's this wonderful academic study that comes out of LA where they started putting the restaurant inspection results on front doors of restaurants. You know what they discovered? More people went to restaurants with good results, fewer people went to restaurants with bad results. That's like the best outcome you could want. No matter what regulatory regime you think you have, trust me, more customers is good, fewer customers is bad. But here's the real kicker. In the first year, there were 17% fewer people who ended up in the emergency room due to foodborne related illnesses. In the second year, there was an additional 6%, in the third year, an additional 3%. So that's like 25 to 30% reduction of foodborne related illnesses in the ER at the most expensive point of contact in the healthcare system. So imagine if you were actually able to scale that up so you displayed restaurant inspection results everywhere people were. But we have devices that do that. You know, you got Urban Spoon, you got Yelp. Imagine if in addition to kind of the friendly like star rating that the crowd has provided you, we also provide you with restaurant inspection results. If you did that in Canada alone, I estimate just in savings in healthcare, what are we at, $100 million now? And we're not even talking at this point about the lost productivity hours of people like me curled up doing terrible things. So this problem is not just at local government. Like this next act here, what you're seeing here, this is a Health Canada Act. This is basically showing you what products have been recalled. Again, if you are checking this out in the store as you're buying goods, you are in the 1% of the OECD. So, you know, the government's to come in and say, oh, we want to partner with people to solve these problems. And I'm saying, no, we don't want to partner. We want to figure out how to coordinate this. And, you know, I have all sorts of ideas about how we can do things like this. The State Department, for example, has this Safe Traveler program where when you travel abroad, you know, you're supposed to register at the embassy of the country that you go to, you know, in case something goes wrong. Like, name the last time you did that. Again, people, like, now people are too shy to raise their hands. They're like, I don't want to be that guy. And of course, the crazy thing is, as hard as it is to pull people over there, there's like millions and millions and millions of people around the world who every day are sending all of their travel information to TripIt. Now, imagine if you just had a little disclosure button on TripIt that said, hey, in an emergency, can we pass your information on to the State Department? Like, could we do that? Or maybe the Department of Foreign Affairs? And think of all the people who begin to use that service. And then you could, like, you know, once you solve that problem, then you can just have a standard that, like, any travel organization begin to use as long as you allow them to send your information on to an authority that can help you in a crisis. All that this does is show us that, you know, when we are cooperative, we can have solutions that are effective. And what I really love is they're invisible. You're using them and you don't even know you're using them. And that's what you want, because I don't want to be thinking about going to some website to register stuff. I want to be spending time with my 11-month-old son. And when it all comes together, you've experienced it. It's so beautiful. So look at this. Right now, this is Google Maps. This is how to get from where I used to live down to the airplane station. And right now, you're looking at this in English. You should ask yourself, how does Google Maps even know what your travel schedule is? It's because every single night, TransLink, your local transit authority, is uploading that data, and anyone, including Google, local hackers, can go and download it and do cool things with it. But you know what makes this even more cool is right now you're looking at this in English, now you're looking at it in Spanish, and now you're looking at Chinese. It's invisible, but the service is incredible. And if we could do that across a whole set of problems, I get really excited about what the power of government could be. And even here, you have some countries that are starting to use this stuff strategically. There's this one in the UK where they started releasing information about the performance of cardiac surgeons, and the following year there were 1,000 fewer deaths. Mostly because a whole bunch of surgeons got together and said, we've got to improve what we're doing because people are actually seeing what's going on. And the city of Manchester, they started sharing data, and they found that they were saving $14 million a year just because now, all of a sudden, if I wanted a piece of information that somebody in another department had, I didn't have to like go to my manager and book a meeting, and then they had to book a meeting with that department, and then all of a sudden, before you know, like the lawyers are involved, or like writing contracts, like all of that disappears. Because what we're doing is we're moving away from a culture of permission and enabling a culture of cooperative innovation. And in Vancouver, we've done a little bit of that. I worked with the city, I helped write the Open Motion and worked with them to launch their open data portal. And sometimes you have like things that happen in a cooperative environment you're not even going to imagine. One of the things that got me the most excited is there's a local think tank called Bing Tom Architects. They got together and they started downloading information. They wrote a report about the future of Vancouver and how it would be impacted by rising sea levels. And they could actually look at what are all the foundations that were going to get impacted and what would that do to tax revenue. I think the city of Vancouver has probably gotten close to $300,000 in free consulting advice from Bing Tom, all because they made the information available. And then some local hackers got together at the Center for Digital Media and created a Grand Theft Auto style video game using the data. So sometimes you get the serious and sometimes you get the fun. And what you're looking at, those are actual building outlines taken from the city's open data portal, mapped into Bing Maps, and you're driving your taxi around and you're picking up fares. Like really kind of experimental but fun stuff. So when we design for participation, and when we allow people to simply coordinate, they can do interesting things. Of course, often when you think about kind of doing the getting information from the public into government, you know, you kind of get this like scared open mic feel, where all of a sudden you're going to be like, we're going to let anybody in, and like, you know, the most angry person who has like 20 minutes of venting is going to go, and so like a whole bunch of people are like, I don't really want to participate in that process. And the crazy thing is I actually think that we've been doing really effective engagement and consultation for like 30 years of local government, using the one service that of course everybody is used to using, but we don't ever think of in those ways, and that's 911. Like when you think about 911, we don't have a police officer on every street corner. We don't have a fireman on every street corner like looking around to see if there's a crime or stuff like that. I mean, there are stuff that cops do on their own, right? They do some investigating, they find some people doing some bad things, they bust down the door, they arrest some people. Hopefully you and I have nothing to do with that process. And then sometimes the ambulances get deployed, like the Eagles are coming to town, like the Boomers are going to be out, they're going to do some things they haven't done in a while. Let's have an ambulance there, like that's... I don't need to call 911 to tell them that, they know that, right? So the amazing thing is, when you look at the deployment of emergency services, we have experts who tell us where to go, but actually we rely on a crowd of people to tell us where to deliver the most important service we offer local residents with pinpoint accuracy at the right place at the right time. Now, I'm fully willing to admit that a lot of the people who call 911 are very self-interested. And there's nothing wrong with that. In an open source project, people often solving bugs that they care about, they're also very self-interested. But it still works. And then sometimes you have a lot of people who actually call 911 just because they want to be helpful. I've only called 911 once. It was because a car in front of me was driving very erratically and I did not know what was going on. I was not particularly self-interested. I felt quite safe, but I was worried about others. And of course, what gets me even more excited is governments are starting to figure out how to do more of this. So this is 311. So this is now, rather than calling in about emergencies, we're going to call in about potholes or broken signs. And this is actually in Grand Rapids, in Grand Prairie in Alberta, and actually followed every complaint that was made for 3 months. And the amazing thing is I use the word complaint, that's what everybody talks about, but actually everybody's quite cordial. They say, hey, this thing's not working, and then the city says, oh, we went out and looked for it, but we didn't find it. So somebody else logs in and says, oh, I went and double-checked, you went to the wrong place, it's actually here. There's this wonderful dialogue that people are having with their citizens to actually try to pinpoint the problem, gathering data from people. We can make kind of like these small problems, I think, kind of go away. And what gets me particularly excited is the reason I believe in kind of permission-based and not kind of overarching dominant systems, but actually this coordinating system is if we can figure out how to architect some of the smaller problems, maybe we can figure out how to architect for some of the bigger problems. Now, what I don't want you to go is kind of running off in the future and thinking that our robot overlords are going to take care of us, we're never going to have to worry again, and then we're actually going to take the power out of politics. And that's hard because even I get really excited about slides like this where Google's able to predict when a flu epidemic is going to hit. What they do is they, based on the searches people make, they actually have an algorithm that allows them to show 6 weeks in advance when there's going to be a flu epidemic. And what you're looking at, the blue line is Google's prediction, and that yellow line is Health Canada's assessment of when there was a flu epidemic 6 weeks after the fact. So there's Google predicting and Health Canada telling you. And so people look at this and they get very excited. They say, oh my gosh, we're going to have a government that's going to do everything for us. It's going to figure out all of our problems. We are going to live in a utopia. And of course, that's not going to happen because we've always liked to use data in really interesting ways that maybe didn't always serve the public good. What you're looking at right now is a congressional district in Illinois. It may look like it has an odd shape, and that's because it does. And you know why it does? It's because somebody was able to take statistical data and look at that and say, well, these people will probably vote for this party, well, these people will probably vote for this party, so why don't we create a shape that actually produces the outcome that we want? So we've always used data in ways that has been kind of problematic, but what's been interesting is it's usually been the people in power who've been able to use that data. And so the belief has been in open data and in open innovation that when you make all this stuff open, we'll get rid of the power structure. Everybody will be equal, and we'll all be able to do things. And I believe strongly in open data. I actually believe in the need for allow people to experiment and try doing things. But I don't believe that it makes us all equal. It doesn't get rid of the debate. All it does is make the data political. So if we used to have a conversation up here, if that conversation now is going to be based on data, well, we sure as hell want to control what the data is that's going to inform that conversation. That's where the battle moves. And we saw that with the long-form census. Like the first real data battle in our country's history that we're all conscious of. All of a sudden we had a government that says, we're going to eliminate this information. They didn't actually eliminate it, they just made it kind of basically useless by making it voluntary. But what that really did is it drew all this information from the public's hand, and from the private sector's hand, and from the non-profit sector's hand, and from the government's hands. So it made it harder for us to actually assess where there are real problems, because they don't want us to go and solve them. If you control the data, you can actually control the debate. And you're going to see more of this. So you saw up in North Carolina, they had senators who actually told local scientists who worked for the government they were not allowed to use climate change models that predicted accelerated rise in sea levels. They could only use ones that predicted linear. Of course, this has huge impacts on the insurance industry, huge impacts on planning, could lead to all sorts of terrible planning processes where we build more stuff right on the coast, which of course is going to be susceptible to hurricanes like Sandy. But if you can control the data, and you can control what people are allowed to use, the rest of the debate doesn't matter anymore. So I'm really excited. I believe we can architect for better problems. We can architect to solve problems more effectively. But that doesn't mean that we've got to stop thinking critically. I want you all to be hacking the organizations that you work in, to be changing them to make them do better things, to make them dance in ways that they aren't supposed to be dancing, but particularly in ways that engage the employees and engage the public in new and fun ways. But don't for a second believe that power somehow disappeared from that, and you all need to be thinking critically as you do it. Thank you so much.